So today we take a massive look at Earthworm Jim for the Mega Drive. That's right, the game that was essentially a cult classic, also on the PC, now comes to the Dreamcast. Let's take a look.
Earthworm Jim!
The soil he did crawl.
Earthworm Jim!
A super suit did fall. Jim was just a dirt-eating, chewy length of worm flesh, but all that came to a crashing end.
Earthworm Jim!
He's such a groovy guy.
Earthworm Jim!
He rockets through the sky, cruising through the universe, having lots of fun. Here comes Earthworm Jim, you know that he's a...
So here we go, let's boot up the Dreamcast and let's play Earthworm Jim on the Sega Mega Drive. That's right, now obviously it did come out for the Super Nintendo, but I am very much, as you know, I'm a Sega fanboy. And we're basically, the way we're going to be playing this on the Sega Dreamcast, I'm afraid to say, is via a Genesis emulator for the Sega Dreamcast. Don't get me wrong though, still cool, right? And we're still playing Earthworm Jim on the Sega Dreamcast. Groovy, right? So this obviously came out in 1994 by Shiny Entertainment, and this was quite a hit for a number of people. Now, I remember first playing this on the PC rather than the Sega Mega Drive or Genesis, but don't get me wrong, I would say this is probably on par. Now, first off, I have to say this graphically for a Mega Drive game is stunning. You just don't see these kind of visuals very often, and let's face it, it did come quite late on in the Sega Genesis lifespan. So you can obviously expect, as hardware gets older, software nearly always catches up. That's basically what happened here. But, you know, let's give it its dues. This is a... well, actually, no. Let's start with a few negatives, because there are a few with this version of Earthworm Jim, and I'm going to tell you, the controls are shockingly... okay, they're not unusable, but they're just a little bit finicky, you know? They're just a little bit... they make it harder than you'd expect to for a platform game. Now, like I said, I didn't actually originally play the Genesis version, so I can't really comment and say, well, it was exactly like this on the Sega Genesis, but with the Dreamcast controller, don't get me wrong, with the D-pad and the buttons you've got access to there, it just doesn't feel quite there, especially with the shooting mechanics, because obviously you're going to be shooting all around the screen. It just doesn't really feel like you've got a true grip on Earthworm Jim himself, especially when you're bouncing from platform to platform. Like I said, as you see here, trying to shoot enemies. It just doesn't feel quite right. But maybe, like I said, maybe that's how it was all along on the Mega Drive, and I just didn't know about it. Which is a real shame, because it feels like maybe if the controls have been focused on a little bit more, then the game would be a lot more enjoyable and not so hard. That's the one thing I will say about this game, is it's really, really hard. But yeah, I guess games back then were a lot harder than they are now, especially platform games, to the point where it felt like you were really, really trying hard to make sure you don't die, whereas now, yeah, infinite number of lives, etc, etc, etc. Yeah, this game's got a continue mechanic as well, which is great, because like I said, you're gonna die a lot. This is not easy. Ammo, though, I will say is replenishing, self-replenishing. Health, not so much, so you have to make sure you grab as much health as you can whenever you see it, and you do start off with 5 or 6 lives, which is great as well. Another great feature of this game, and I gotta say one of the saving graces, not just visually, is the sound design. They've really, really nailed the sound design in this game, so much so the characters sound exactly how they sound. You know, all sounds are on cue and they all sound really, really good, especially on a 16-bit console, where you may not have had that many sound effects and recordings at your disposal. They've really done a good job here, and on the sound compression itself, it sounds a little bit ropey, but for a Genesis cartridge, it sounds really, really good. The other great thing about the marketing for this game was the fact that they came up with all this original concept art, as you can see here, to get people to want to buy the game. You cannot say that you're looking at that and thinking that that looks bad. You rarely see marketing like this anymore. Now the game itself features 12 or 10 to 12 levels depending on the version you've got, each of them having bosses and also bosses within each level as well, kind of like, you know, a little bit like mini bosses to keep you going. These bosses range from really, really easy to really, really hard, but that's kind of what you get with most platformers as you go through the levels, as you go further on, is those bosses get harder and harder and harder. But, you know, if this game was easy, it probably wouldn't bring you coming back for more, whereas it does here, and it does it pretty damn well. And the bosses are pretty easy to work out, but it still doesn't make them any easier, let me tell you that. And like I said, it was most levels that had bosses, not all of them, but pretty much every single boss. Now, in between each level, you also have the Psycrow Missions. These are called Andy Asteroids, or Andy's Asteroids. These are little levels where you essentially do some pseudo 3D racing against Psycrow. You've got to try and beat him. If you beat him, then you don't have to battle him. But if you don't beat him, at the end of these levels, you have to battle him. Now, obviously, you can pick up all these little coloured orbs. I couldn't actually tell you what they do, apart from the thing that spins that looks a bit like Sonic's infinity little stars. I would highly advise those because they will speed you up, and they will also stop you getting hurt. Now, what I mean by that is hitting the asteroids. Now, as like I said, as soon as you get to the end, you will face Psycrow if you didn't beat him. As you can see him in the distance here, he's pretty hard to catch. So much so, the first time I actually played, I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. I just thought, am I just racing here? Am I just collecting orbs? What on earth do I do? But you do obviously end up catching up to him if you're good enough. And then you'll obviously see, as I didn't catch up to him, you then have to fight him at the end. The fight, though, again, I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. It was to the point where you're shooting him or you're slapping him with your head. Does that make any sense? But yeah, what you actually have to do is you have to knock him down to that sort of level, then whip him with your head. That's basically what you do, and that is the way to defeat him. So you do that a few times, and then you will actually kill him. Well, I say kill him, you just make him fly away. Obviously, there's no real deaths in a game like this, is there? It's a cartoon from the 90s, made into a Sega Mega Drive game, and we all love it for that, let's say. And you can obviously tell this is very much... When they made this game, they had the TV show in mind. This wasn't a game where they were just like a few developers who probably knew nothing about the game went to create a game. This is clearly made and directed by either the creators or the fans of this game, and you can tell through the humour, the level design, everything, this has really hit the nail on the head for a game that was based upon a TV show, and it's done really, really well. Now you can pick up a physical copy of this for about 15 to 20 quid, which isn't too bad, to be fair. This game wasn't exactly a limited run. There is also a second game and an N64 game, which is a 3D platformer, which is actually pretty decent as well, a game that I will probably review later on. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this review. Like and subscribe, obviously hit the notification button, and I'll leave you with this footage here for the rest of it for Earthworm Jim on the Sega Dreamcast. Thanks for watching, guys.